Welcome, everyone. Please find your seat. Welcome, welcome. Please find your seat. That's okay. Welcome. Please find your seat. Welcome. Please find your seat. Please be seated. Welcome. Please find your seat. Please be seated. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. Please be seated. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly be seated at this time. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats at this time. Would you join me in welcoming
Please be seated.
President of the US-China Business Council, Ambassador Craig Allen.
Please be seated. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. We are about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. Find your seat, please. Please sit down. Okay. Please sit down. We shall begin right now. If I may have your attention for one moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we begin? Secretary Yellen, Ambassador Burns, Ambassador Xie, Representative Larson, Chairman Casper, Vice Chairman Subramanian, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this 50th anniversary gala for the US-China Business Council. Our theme is Making History Together, Building for the Next 50 Years. Let me begin by thanking our many sponsors for this evening, in particular, our Jubilee year-long sponsors, FedEx, Gilead Sciences, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and Visa, as well as our trailblazer sponsors, Air Products, Chubb, and Xcoal. Also, our leadership sponsors, who you will see on the screen, I think. And our leadership sponsor, there we go, all right. Our benefactors and our patron-level underwriters. We are grateful to each and every company for supporting the USCBC. A round of applause for our sponsors, please. Thank you. The Council's origins go back to the earliest days of the modern bilateral US-China relationship. Immediately after President Nixon's trip to China in 1972, Chas Freeman drafted memos proposing the creation of a business association. China was impoverished at the time. There was virtually no trade or investment. But Bob Hormats, then at the NSC, understood the potential, and he gathered a group of business leaders who formed USCBC's first board of directors. Paul Speltz, working with Henry Kissinger, supported this effort, and it worked. Hundreds of companies quickly joined the newly minted organization, which became the US-China Business Council. And I'd like to take just one moment to recognize these founders. Specifically, let me thank Chas Freeman, Bob Hormats, and Paul Speltz, who each played a vital role in 1972 and 1973. Bob is with us today. Bob? Chas and Paul are watching these proceedings from New England, but I believe that Chas is represented by his daughter, Carla. Carla, are you in the room? Don't see you. We would like Carla and Bob to stand to receive our recognition for Chas, Paul, and Bob's contributions to USCBC, and on behalf of all the architects of the modern US-China relationship. We honor you. To this day, the mission of USCBC remains unchanged. Our mission is to advocate on behalf of American companies doing business in China to expand the overall bilateral commercial relationship. We are a membership organization, and our commitment to members also remains unchanged. We support American companies doing business in China to benefit all American citizens from across this great land. Factory workers, farmers, truckers, miners, ranchers, fishermen, actors, longshoremen, university professors, waiters, taxi drivers, hospitality workers, and on and on and on and on. More than 1 million of our fellow citizens are employed due to trade with China, and each of their jobs is important. In simple terms, our commitment to them and to you is to advocate for a level playing field that will unleash the power of markets and fair competition to improve the lives of all market participants. While our mission and commitment have not changed, the challenges associated with doing business in China have changed dramatically. Unlike 50 years ago, China is now an advanced economy and middle-income country. In short, there has been a convergence of capabilities between China and the United States, even though there remain differences in values and systems. Yet China's integration into the global economy is unequivocally a positive development that has brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. History teaches us that sound economic policy underpins global geopolitical stability, and that attempts to undermine economic interdependence can lead to greater global geopolitical instability. This further strengthens our conviction that we all benefit from a level playing field and free and fair markets in the vast majority of our industries that do not present national security concerns. We have confidence that the success of U.S. business in China will benefit both countries, both peoples, and contribute to overall geopolitical stability. The U.S.-China Business Council is proud of our role of making history together. We understand that there will be naysayers and doubters. Perhaps in this era, disagreements and discord are inevitable. Yet at the end of the day, the United States and China must collaborate in the service of humanity. And if we fail to collaborate, it will be to the detriment of humanity. USCBC chooses to fight for collaboration and for a level playing field that yields maximum benefits to all. We're not there yet. We have a long way to go. But together, we will continue to make progress to the benefit of both of our countries. And that is why we pledge to you to build for the next 50 years. Thank you. With that, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Ryan McInerney, CEO of Visa. Thank you to Visa for supporting USCBC as a 50th anniversary year-long Jubilee sponsor. Mr. McInerney has been with Visa since 2013 when he assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer in February of this year. He leads an organization of some 30,000 employees with enormous global impact, including generously sponsoring the Olympics and APEC. Please welcome Ryan to the stage.
Thank you, Craig, for all the work that you and your team do so tirelessly on behalf of all of us. It is wonderful to be here and to have an evening to celebrate the US-China Business Council's 50th anniversary with friends, with dignitaries, including Secretary Yellen, Ambassador Xie, and Ambassador Burns. At Visa, we deeply appreciate US-China Business Council's leadership in forging bilateral dialogue and economic engagement between the United States and China. Visa's been in China for the past 4 decades, and through open collaboration and innovation, we support the continued growth for our clients, our partners, and local merchants. Visa has long supported bilateral engagement between our two countries. This year, we partnered with the US Embassy on bringing the Philadelphia Orchestra's 50th anniversary tour to commemorate its historic 1973 tour of China, the first by an American orchestra. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a key figure in bilateral relationship building, the Ambassador of the United States of America to the People's Republic of China, Nicholas Burns. Ambassador Burns is well known in this room and around the world for his deep experience, having served 6 U.S. presidents and 9 secretaries of state throughout his diplomatic career, including as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and Ambassador to NATO. Since taking his post in 2022, Ambassador Burns has served as a trusted bridge between Beijing and Washington, working to strengthen the bond between the United States and China. He has also been a partner and counsel to the American business community operating in China as we work to strengthen the relationship between these two important economies. Ambassador Burns has generously shared his time and insights regularly with the U.S.-China Business Council and many of us in this room, and we're pleased to welcome him for this milestone anniversary. Thank you, Ambassador Burns, for your leadership and your partnership. And with that, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Burns to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here. I just came from Beijing a couple of days ago. It's nice to be back in our nation's capital. And I'm really proud to be here to celebrate something very important. And that's 50 years of the US-China Business Council. That's the history of this organization as one of the founding fathers and mothers of the US-China relationship. I want to salute our chairman, Mark Casper, of Thermo Fisher, one of our great business leaders in the United States. I want to salute my partner in business promotion in China, Craig Allen, Ambassador Craig Allen, who does such a great job for this organization. Ryan, thank you. Ryan McInerney of Visa. We've worked very closely together and we'll continue to do that. Visa is a great company. And I want to thank Raj Subramanian as well from FedEx, who's been a good friend, and I've learned a lot from Raj. I so much admire our Secretary of the Treasury, and I am looking forward to her remarks. And I want to salute her this evening, and I want to ask all of you to join me in thanking her for leading the reopening of our economic relationship with China. I'm going to say a few words tonight about what has essentially been the revival of a close coordinated relationship between the two governments. I'm not going to speak about economic affairs because I've learned enough in Washington to know that only the Secretary of the Treasury should talk about the nation's economic affairs. But in doing so, I also want to pay tribute to someone with whom I had 24 meetings in my first year in Beijing when he was Vice Foreign Minister of China. And he's now the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China here in our country. Ambassador Xie Feng, welcome. Great to have you with us. (1973), 50 years ago. That was a very consequential year for the relationship between the American people and the Chinese people. The US-China Business Council was created in that year, and thank you to Bob Hormats, who's a close friend of mine, for having had the idea that we should have this organization. We had had practically no economic ties of any kind between our two countries for 24 years during a real Cold War between our countries, and the U.S.-China Business Council was the first organization created to bring our countries back together and our economies back together. That same year, as all of you know, saw the return of official relations, diplomatic relations, between the United States and China in the wake of President Nixon's famous and very important trip to Beijing and Shanghai. To symbolize what Nixon to China meant in practical terms that same year in 1973, our first ambassador, Ambassador David K.E. Bruce, raised the American flag in China for the very first time in July 1973. The American flag had not been visible in that country for 24 years. And so it was a bit of poetry this summer when 50 years to the week since that historic flag raising, the American who did more than anyone else to create the modern U.S. relationship with China, Henry Kissinger, came to China on his final visit. I met him at the airport. It was a blisteringly hot day, 102 degrees Fahrenheit, when he walked off the plane after a 20-hour journey, smiling, visibly energized, 100 years of age, and he threw himself into 5 days of meetings with the Chinese leadership, including President Xi Jinping, and we had the huge honor at our embassy in China, 700 of us, to welcome him back to the embassy that he built and to honor him for being the founding father in this relationship. Speaking personally, I don't believe there's any other American who did more to create and shape and nurture and build our relationship with China than Henry Kissinger. His work with President Nixon and Chairman Mao and Premier Zhou Enlai, secret diplomacy in 1971 and 72, it's one of the most brilliant examples in American diplomatic history of ingenuity and strategic vision. I think he wrote one of the finest books by an American on China. It's called On China, 2011. And he was the only American leader, and Ambassador Cui Tongkai mentioned this to me, and I hadn't realized it. Ambassador Cui said, Henry Kissinger is the only American leader, maybe the only world leader, who dealt with every Chinese leader from Chairman Mao to President Xi Jinping. I deeply valued my 2-decade friendship with him. I valued the counsel he gave me in Zoom meetings during COVID and then in private meetings about how the United States and China might manage to work out a way to be friends with each other, a way to compete with each other, a way to arrive at difficult conversations. And I think all of you know that he was buried today, not far from here at Arlington National Cemetery. I thought it might be appropriate if we all just stood and applauded for that great American. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know that Ambassador Xie will have something to say about Secretary Kissinger as well. We're looking forward to a new year, and I can report to you this evening that both of our governments have found a way to bring a measure of badly needed stability to the U.S.-China relationship. I can also report that as a result of last month's California summit meeting, and Secretary Yellen and I were together there with President Biden, we have deeper channels of communications between our two governments. Now, that doesn't mean that the relationship is not contested and not competitive, because it certainly still is. It does not mean that we don't argue about the major differences between us on many issues, including vital issues, because we still do, including across the board. But it does mean that we're better connected to be able to work together on issues, difficult issues like fentanyl and climate change, and to manage our differences responsibly, which we have to do for the sake of both of our countries and for the sake of the world. In my world of diplomacy, that is progress. Starting in June and until this week, we launched a series of visits to each other's capitals by our senior officials to rebuild bridges, to reconnect our leaders, and to renew a full dialogue in economics, in national security, in commercial diplomacy between our two governments. This summer, Secretary Tony Blinken, Secretary Janet Yellen, Secretary Gina Raimondo all came to Beijing. We had not had secretaries of each of those departments in China in 4.5 years. Our climate negotiator, John Kerry, came to Beijing, and his counterpart, Xie Feng, then visited Sunnylands in California, in fact, just before President Biden and President Xi's summit. Jake Sullivan and I spent an entire weekend on the island of Malta in September with Foreign Minister Wang Yi, talking about some of the difficult issues in this relationship. And then we had our first congressional visit in 4 years, a bipartisan delegation led by the Majority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and then the first visit by an American governor in 4 years, Gavin Newsom of California, to China. We had been pulled apart by the pandemic. Our two governments were not talking at a senior level. We're not visiting each other's capitals. And so we were able to bring the governments together, and then Secretary Yellen was able to meet with Vice Premier Xie Feng in California as a warm-up, as a way to introduce the summit meeting between the two leaders. And we're going to see much more of that in the next year. We're going to see a normal diplomatic relationship of our leaders at the cabinet level engaging with each other. This all culminated in California, Woodside, California, at a beautiful state just north of the Stanford campus. And I think for all of us who were there, that was a consequential meeting. President Biden said at his press conference it was productive, and he thought the most constructive of the 7 meetings that he's had with President Xi since President Biden took office. They agreed to work together on the greatest public health crisis in the United States, and that's the fentanyl crisis. It's the leading cause of death of Americans 18 to 49. They agreed to restore military-to-military contacts at the most senior levels. That's vital because our two militaries, our navies and air forces, are operating in very close proximity to each other in the South and East China Seas and in the Taiwan Strait. They agreed to begin a conversation, and it's urgent, about the implications of artificial intelligence for our respective national securities. And finally, they agreed to reconnect the people of China and the people of the United States, our students, our tourists, our business leaders, so that we might have much greater interaction than we've had throughout the pandemic. Secretary Yellen's going to speak about our economic relationship. I will not do that, but I do want to pay tribute to her and Secretary Raimondo again, because they opened the door to a normal conversation between our private sectors as well as our two governments. All in all, I do think this relationship is more stable than it was, say, on June 1st of 2023, when we began this diplomatic campaign to re-engage. But I have to also acknowledge, as the American ambassador in China this evening, the relationship still remains intensely competitive. It is often quite difficult. We have contested conversations. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. There's a systemic rivalry in many ways between our two countries. We're competing. We're competing for military and security influence in the Indo-Pacific, where the United States has strengthened its strategic relationships with Japan, with the Republic of Korea, with Thailand, with Australia, through AUKUS, and through the Quad with our strategic partner, India. We're competing on economics and trade for a more level playing field. And of course, we're going to continue to stand up for these interests when we do diverge in our conversations with the Chinese leadership. Let me close with a final thought on how we might think about the relationship between our two countries. As we Americans think about working with China in 2024, I think we have to think over the long term, and we should be confident in our own country as we negotiate this vital relationship between China and the United States. We have the enormous advantage of strong and trusted allies in the Indo-Pacific. We have first-rate technology companies, first-rate companies across the board in the American private sector. We have the finest research universities in the world. And we have, I think, America's greatest power, the power of our ideas, the power of democracy, the power of our deep belief in human freedom, the power of our foundational rights in the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and the rule of law, the power of our conviction that all men and all women are created equal. We will continue to stand up for those values as we prosecute this very important relationship. And so I want to salute all of you for being here tonight. This is a night to celebrate the US-China Business Council, the next 50 years of the US-China Business Council. We will be very happy to work with all of you towards the goal of normalizing an economic relationship, of making sure that we're doing what we can on both sides to bring it forward, and most important, to have a stable relationship between our two countries, to make sure that that relationship is always peaceful in the long, historic, complicated, but vital relationship that all of us are working for. That's my message to you tonight, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I got it. The other duty I have tonight is to read something that's far more important than the words I've just spoken, and that's a letter from President Biden to the US-China Business Council. Here is the text of President Biden's letter. I send my warmest greetings to all those gathered in Washington, D.C. for the US-China Business Council's Jubilee Gala. For half a century, your organization has sought to strengthen economic and trade ties and has advocated for a level playing field for American companies in China. The world expects the United States and China to work together to address issues like the climate crisis and the global food and health security crises, which impact lives everywhere and are too big for any nation to resolve alone. I appreciate the work the Council has done over the years to advance these important conversations. As I discussed with President Xi Jinping when I met him last month, the United States is committed to responsibly managing the competition between our two countries. In that meeting, we affirmed that when it's possible and in our mutual interest, we will work together. In that spirit, we took tangible steps to restart our cooperation on counter-narcotics and reinstate communications between our two militaries. We also welcome ongoing consultations in areas including commercial, economic, and financial issues. Talking to our competitors follows American diplomatic precedent and is a key element of maintaining global stability and delivering for our people. I appreciate the US-China Business Council's 5 decades of effort in supporting commercial relations between our two countries. Signed, Joe Biden, President of the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Burns, and thank you for sharing the a congratulatory letter from President Biden. We're delighted that you're able to join us this evening in person, as well as at our galas in Beijing and Shanghai and San Francisco as well. Next, please allow me to introduce Mr. Raj Subramanian, President and CEO of FedEx. We are grateful for FedEx's continued partnership with USCBC as one of our 50th anniversary Jubilee year-long sponsors. Mr. Subramanian has been recognized for his international leadership and experience, keen business instincts, and a focus on globalization, which has contributed to FedEx's success over his 30 years with the company. In February of this year, Mr. Subramanian was appointed by US President Joe Biden to the President's Export Council. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you, Craig. And as Vice Chair of the US-China Business Council, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening here at the 50th year of the US-China Business Council. I'm really, really thrilled to be in our nation's capital with you all tonight. Now, reaching the end of the calendar year, there's a natural tendency to look backwards about what you've done and where you've been, a year in review of sorts. Well, what comes to mind for me is, first, a productive trip to China, coordinated by the US-China Business Council, getting to meet with a number of Chinese officials, as well as my friend Ambassador Burns, who you just heard from. It's also an opportunity to connect with some of our 11,000 plus FedEx team members in China, a group of that truly embodies the FedEx Purple Promise to make every FedEx experience outstanding. And also, the wonderful opportunity to share a brief laugh with President Xi Jinping last month in San Francisco about transportation of pandas at the APEC Summit dinner hosted in his honor, and more on that in a minute. But when reflecting upon these personal 2023 experience, as well as the encouraging words from leadership in both our countries, I feel optimistic about what's ahead in 2024. If you're here in the room tonight, you share something in common with me and our next speaker, Ambassador Xie Feng, and that is the firm belief in the value of strong US-China business ties. Last month, FedEx had the honor of transporting 3 beloved giant pandas from the National Zoo right here in Washington, D.C., to Chengdu, China, and coordinating this VIP shipment, and by VIP, I mean very important pandas. That required immense cooperation with Ambassador Xie and his team at the embassy. So permit me a few moments to share some background on my friend, Ambassador Xie. He has been with the Minister of Foreign Affairs for most of his career and is considered one of the top Chinese experts on the United States. He previously served in the Chinese embassy as counselor and spokesperson, and then as minister was appointed by President Xi Jinping this year to be the Chinese ambassador to the United States. The ambassador's other leadership positions include serving in both the North American and Ocean Department in Beijing as China's ambassador to Indonesia and commissioner of the Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong. Though the ambassador arrived in D.C. for this ambassadorship only in May this year, clearly he is no stranger to Washington. With that, please join me in welcoming the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to the United States, Xie Feng.
Well, thank you, Ralph, for your introduction. What Ralph said reminded me of the conversation between President Xi Jinping and Mayor Breed when he was departing from San Francisco. Mayor Breed was asking the president to send pandas to San Francisco. Well, the Honorable Secretary Yellen, Chairman Casper, President Allen, Ambassador Burns, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a great pleasure to join you at the Jubilee Gala of the US-China Business Council. First, I have the honor to read the congratulatory letter from His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China. Now the message of congratulations from President Xi. I wish to congratulate the USCBC Board of Directors and all its members on the 50th anniversary of the Council. I would also like to send my sincere greetings to people from all sectors in the United States who have long cared for and supported China-US economic and trade cooperation. The world is undergoing major transformation unseen in a century. Whether China and the United States can work hand in hand to tackle the challenges together concerns the interests of our two peoples and the future of humanity. During our recent meeting in San Francisco, President Joe Biden and I had in-depth discussions on issues vital to China-US relations and reached important common understandings. China is ready in the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation to make concerted efforts with the United States to implement the deliverables of the meeting and promote healthy, stable, and sustainable development of our bilateral relations. As an important part of China-US relations, our business cooperation has brought many tangible benefits to the two peoples. China will remain firmly committed to advancing high-quality development and high-standard opening up, and China will remain firmly committed to fostering a market-oriented, law-based, and world-class business environment. Chinese modernization will provide more opportunities for businesses from the United States and all other countries. There is huge potential, vast space, and a promising future for greater economic and trade cooperation between our two countries. The past 50 years have witnessed our persistence and joint pursuit of partnership and mutual benefit despite the twists and turns. I hope that the USCBC and its member companies will build more bridges for our friendly exchanges, cultivate more bonds for our practical cooperation, and help write a new chapter of win-win cooperation in the next 50 years. I wish your gala dinner a full success. Xi Jinping, President, the People's Republic of China, December the 14th, 2023. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the congratulatory letter from President Xi reflects the importance he has attached to USCBC and his expectation for greater economic cooperation between China and the United States. It also demonstrates China's readiness to promote the sound, stable, and the sustainable development of China-US relations. My first public speech after arriving in the United States was made at the welcome event hosted by USCBC, also in this hotel. It was in early summer, but back then, a deep chill loomed. Today, we are gathering here in winter, but I feel much warmer. The most heartwarming development recently is the successful summit meeting between President Xi and President Biden in San Francisco. It has added stability to China-US relations at a critical moment and injected positive energy into a turbulent and transforming world. Next year, we will celebrate the 45th anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic ties. The China-US relationship has come to a new starting point, and business cooperation is facing new opportunities. Three things in particular are creating a strong impetus. First, the stabilizing of China-US relations. I have been meeting many friends from the business community over the past 6 months. Their biggest concern was tension between our two countries. And their greatest expectation was a meeting, face-to-face meeting, between our two presidents. Now the summit meeting has become a reality, which has fostered a future-oriented San Francisco vision and charted the course for improving and developing China-US relations. President Xi pointed out that for our two countries, turning our back on each other is not an option. It is unrealistic for one side to try to remodel the other. Any conflict and confrontation would have unbearable consequences for both. The success of our two countries is an opportunity for each other. President Biden also noted that our economies are mutually independent. The United States is glad to see prosperity in China. It does not seek to contain or suppress China's development or to decouple with China. If we look back at the twists and turns in our relations since the start of this year, we will see that dialogue is better than confrontation, cooperation better than decoupling, and stability better than flip-flopping. This should be a consensus between the two sides and also our shared responsibility. Second, the recovery of the Chinese economy. This year, China's economy has rebounded after 3 years of COVID-19. Its GDP grew 5.2% year over year in the first 3 quarters, outpacing many other major economies. International organizations and financial institutions, including IMF, OECD, JP Morgan Chase, and Goldman Sachs, have raised China's GDP growth forecasts for this year to 5 to 5.5%, casting votes of confidence in the Chinese economy. Such growth features higher quality and greener development. China's investment in high-tech sectors grew 11% in the first 10 months, and its renewable energy installed capacity has overtaken that for coal-fired power for the first time. The economy has both appropriately expanded and effectively upgraded. Investors from Asia, Europe, and Middle East have all ramped up their investment in China. In the first 3 quarters, the number of newly established foreign invested enterprises grew 32.4%. And the final consumption expenditure contributed 83% of the GDP growth. China remains one of the best investment destinations with a most promising, huge, and growing market. Third, China's high standard opening up. China is opening up its doors wider and wider. We have announced the removal of all restrictive measures on foreign investment in manufacturing and have lifted foreign ownership limits in the financial sector. We have rolled about 24 measures to optimize the environment for foreign investment and 25 measures to boost financial support for the private sector. We have also been advancing pilot comprehensive reform in Pudong New Area and supporting Beijing in stepping up the development of an integrated national demonstration zone for the opening up the services sector wider. At the annual Central Economic Work Conference a few days ago, it was announced that China will expand the intermediate goods trade, service trade, digital trade, and cross-border e-commerce exports, and ease market access for telecommunications, medical, and other service industries. Good news keep pouring in for China-US business cooperation. Swire Coca-Cola is building a new plant in Jiangsu province. The 6th China International Import Expo saw the largest ever US delegation in its history. American firms also accounted for 1/5 of foreign exhibitors at the first China International Supply Chain Expo last month. Investing and expanding presence in China is a common choice of the business community. Ladies and gentlemen, as President Xi noted in the congratulatory letter, whether China and the United States can work hand in hand to tackle the challenge together concerns the interests of our two peoples and the future of humanity. From the daily life of our people to the global economic outlook, China-US economic cooperation is indispensable. We need to bolster the anchor of China-US relations, the propeller of practical cooperation, and the catalyst for people-to-people exchanges, so as to take our economic cooperation to new heights from San Francisco onward. First, it is important to honor commitments and implement the common understandings reached at the San Francisco summit. The spirit of honoring contracts is the very foundation of business civilization. Words should not ring hollow, and promises must be kept. Otherwise, one would bust his own credibility and undermine mutual trust. China always keeps its word with real actions. After the summit, we have taken a series of practical measures in economy and trade, counter narcotics, and people-to-people exchanges, including authorizing MasterCard and UCC to conduct bank card clearing operations in China, and approving Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. We hope the two sides will work in the same direction. Both show good faith and take concrete actions, enhance communication through the restored and new mechanisms in economy, finance, and other areas, remove obstacles to people-to-people exchanges in flights, visa and border entry, and earnestly deliver on each and every of our President's important common understandings. Second, it is important to keep business cooperation from being politicized. Business is business. Some people, though, have been hyping up so-called China threat, advocating cutting China off from chips, slapping new sanctions, and forcing a China-invested agriculture company with over 50 years of presence in the United States, to sell its farmland. All these stand in stark contrast to the statements by the US side that is ready to keep growing economic and trade relations with China and does not seek to contain or suppress China's development, and run counter to the common understandings reached between the two presidents. The stabilizing momentum in China-US relations should not be disrupted by domestic politics. The US side used to call for letting the market decide. Why should it reverse course now? One needs to clearly define the parameters of national security. Instead of putting everything in a basket of national security, people are baffled when things from Chinese garlic to social media are all considered as a threat to the US national security. How can that be? Seeking one's own security based on the insecurity of others and global industrial and supply chains will not work and should not be an option. Third, it is important to complement each other and expand the list of mutually beneficial cooperation. Jointly advancing mutually beneficial cooperation is one of the 5 pillars of the San Francisco vision. Our presidents have agreed on conducting dialogue and cooperation in areas including economy and trade, people-to-people exchanges, education, science and technology, agriculture, law enforcement, and AI. We have broad space for deepening cooperation. For any decoupling, it is the people who will ultimately pay the cost, and in any major country confrontation, it is the development opportunities of all countries that will be at stake. When overemphasized, competition could veer off into confrontation. We need people who talk more about cooperation so that we can focus more on making the cake of cooperation bigger instead of vying for a larger share, and move along with the trend to open up new horizons and promote transition to digital, smart, and green development. Ladies and gentlemen, only when the overall atmosphere of China-US relations is good can business cooperation prosper. And with robust business cooperation, China-US relations will do better. Confucius once said, "At 50, one knows the will of heaven." Over the past 5 decades, USCBC has actively spoken out for boosting China-US exchanges and cooperation, and made great efforts to advance trade and investment between our two countries. Your contribution to China-US economic cooperation and the development of the overall bilateral relations is deeply appreciated. Going forward, I count on the Council to continue encouraging member companies to uphold the rules of market economy, recognize the mutually beneficial nature of China-US economic cooperation, and the historical trend of peaceful coexistence between our two countries. Strive to be the first to taste the crab with entrepreneurship and courage, and play the long game with vision and insight, so as to write a new chapter of win-win cooperation between China and the United States in the next 50 years. Well, today's gala dinner reminded me of another gala dinner I attended about 2 months ago in New York to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the National Committee on China-US Relations. And Dr. Kissinger attended and was awarded a lifetime award. Dr. Kissinger is an old friend and real friend of China. But first of all, I think he is an American patriot. He takes American interest foremost and first. but he looked at U.S. interests from a broader sense. He recognized that a good and stable Sino-U.S. relations is not only in the interests of China and the United States, but also for the whole world. So I think the best memory for Dr. Kissinger is to carry on his course and to further develop this very important bilateral relations between our two sides. In that spirit, I wish you all a merry and bright holiday season. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that speech and also for the letter from President Xi. I would now like to welcome USCBC's chairman, Mr. Mark Casper, who will introduce this year's distinguished Gala honoree and keynote speaker. Mark was elected as the chair of USCBC's board of directors in June of last year, and we would like to thank Thermo Fisher Scientific for their continued support of USCBC's work, one of our Jubilee year-long sponsors in 2023. Mark is the chairman, president, and chief executive officer of Thermo Fisher Scientific. He is the first USCBC chair from the life sciences industry and the second USCBC chair from the technology sector. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mark Casper to the stage to introduce this year's distinguished guest.
Good evening, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and U.S.-China Business Council colleagues. Thank you again for joining us this evening. You know, I've been on the board for a number of years. It's been a privilege to be the current chair. And the company that I lead, Thermo Fisher Scientific, has been a proud member of the council for many, many years. At Thermo Fisher Scientific, our mission is to enable our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. And whether we're doing that through helping enable breakthrough medicines or patient diagnosis or ensuring that we have clean air or water for the future generations or supporting public safety, it inspires all 125,000 of our colleagues to bring their best every day. When I think about the 40-plus year history that we have in China, we've partnered with Chinese companies and the government to improve air quality, advance healthcare, and ensure food safety. And along with Thermo Fisher, the American companies represented here this evening have been at the forefront of China's modernization. The benefits of that progress are eminently clear and have made a profound positive impact on the Chinese people. The benefits go both ways, of course. According to the Council, the U.S.-China commercial relationship supports more than 1 million American jobs, contributing to the success of American companies and the communities where we thrive. That's why the USCBC is focused on nurturing this historic relationship. We were honored recently to host President Xi in San Francisco, along with Secretary Raimondo. This was the 7th time that the USCBC has served as host to Chinese presidents' engagement with the business community. This followed a busy year of USCBC engagements with the White House and President Biden's cabinet, our August board trip to Beijing, and welcoming Ambassador Xie to Washington. All of these activities are building mutual understanding and connection between our governments and the American business community. and our goal is to further strengthen this relationship to the benefit of both countries and society overall. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker and distinguished honoree for this evening, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen. Tonight, we honor Secretary Yellen as someone who recognizes the importance of the U.S.-China commercial relationship. We congratulate her for her significant impact that she has made in advancing it. Secretary Yellen's leadership and diplomatic efforts have played an important role in shaping the evolving economic landscape between the United States and China. And her approach has been marked by both pragmatism and strategic foresight. In an April speech, Secretary Yellen outlined a comprehensive vision for this bilateral relationship, emphasizing the importance of collaboration and that this can be achieved while also safeguarding U.S. national security interests. She rightfully noted during this speech that the world is big enough for both of us. Her trip in July to China was another significant diplomatic endeavor as it underscored the importance of direct dialogue and engagement to address shared challenges and advance mutual interests. This visit was a testament to her commitment to fostering a constructive and stable economic relationship. And Secretary Yellen has announced that she will visit China again in 2024. In addition, Secretary Yellen's efforts in establishing working groups with China represent a proactive and structured approach to tackling key economic and financial issues together. These initiatives reflect her understanding that cooperative frameworks and regular two-way communication are essential for meaningful progress. As we gather here today, we recognize the significant responsibilities that come with stewarding such a pivotal economic relationship. Secretary Yellen's leadership cannot be understated in navigating this journey. She has deftly balanced the need for competitive economic policies with the pursuit of global stability and security. Tonight, as we reflect on the theme of our Jubilee milestone, 50 years making history together and building for the next 50, we thank Secretary Yellen for her outstanding contributions to the U.S.-China relations. Secretary Yellen, we couldn't be more delighted to have you with us tonight to recognize you as this year's USCBC Distinguished Honoree. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And my thanks to the US-China Business Council for inviting me to join you this evening. Mark, thank you for that lovely introduction. We're here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the US-China Business Council. We also mark a little over a year since the meeting between President Biden and President Xi in Bali, Indonesia. Following this meeting, President Biden directed me and other senior officials to deepen our communication with China, setting in motion actions from my visit to China in July to meet China's new economic team, to the Treasury Department's launch of the economic and financial working groups with the Chinese government. The working groups have now met twice, and I welcomed my counterpart, Vice Premier Xie Feng, to San Francisco in November, before President Biden met with President Xi almost exactly 1 month ago today. Throughout this diplomacy, issues that are important to many of you in the audience today, such as market access, have been top of mind for me. I'll discuss this and other areas tonight as I step back to reflect on the foundations of the economic approach we're pursuing, the progress we've made over the past year, and our plans for the year ahead. The Biden administration's strategy towards China begins with investing at home and rebuilding alliances abroad. When President Biden took office, considerable work was needed both domestically and internationally. The Trump administration had failed to make investments at home in critical areas like infrastructure and advanced technology, while also neglecting relationships with our partners and allies that had been forged and strengthened over decades. This left America more vulnerable and more isolated in a competitive global economy that demands that nations take exactly the opposite approach. It damaged our global standing and meant significant missed economic opportunities for American firms and workers. Over the past 3 years, the Biden administration has course-corrected. We're investing at home through President Biden's Investing in America agenda. The administration's economic plan helped power an historically fast recovery from the pandemic. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, together with the private sector investments they're driving, are fueling economic growth, building the clean energy industries of the future, and increasing opportunity for people and places in America that have historically been left behind. We're also deepening our ties with countries around the world, including those in the Indo-Pacific. In my trips to India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam, I saw the region's dynamism firsthand. Greater economic integration with the region, when pursued strategically, can be immensely beneficial. We can boost production at home to serve expanding markets, creating jobs for American workers. And we can partner to bolster our economic security, including through building more secure supply chains, increasing America's resilience while enabling more growth in Indo-Pacific economies. As I've said before, America's fundamental economic strength means that we have nothing to fear from healthy economic competition with China or any other country. Our strength positions us to seek new opportunities while navigating challenges. It's within this context that we've shaped our economic approach to China. I and other U.S. officials have repeatedly stated that the United States does not seek to decouple from China. This would be damaging to both our economies and would have negative global repercussions. In my speech on the U.S.-China economic relationship in April, I made this clear. I also laid out 3 objectives for our relationship. The United States will pursue a healthy economic relationship with China, one that benefits both sides. We will seek to cooperate with China on global challenges. And because our national security must remain our foremost priority, we will deploy our economic tools when needed to secure our country's national security interests and protect human rights. Over the past year, we've advanced this vision. I'll start with our pursuit of a healthy economic relationship. When the US-China Business Council was established, China's share of global GDP was less than 3%. Now, it's almost 18%. China has become the United States' 3rd largest trading partner after Canada and Mexico. The United States is China's largest. This provides a tremendous opportunity, one I know many council members and others here today see clearly. American exports to China and Chinese investment in the United States can support American jobs. And American businesses can benefit from access to key inputs that allow them to lower production costs, become more competitive, and create even more jobs. But for too long, American workers and firms have not been able to compete on a level playing field with those in China. The PRC deploys unfair economic practices, from non-market tools to barriers to access for foreign firms, to coercive actions against American companies. These policies harm American workers and firms. And over the past year, we have consistently raised these concerns through the working groups and direct diplomacy. So let me be clear, I will always champion your interests and work to make sure that American workers and firms are treated fairly. If the PRC were to shift away from its state-driven economic approach in industry and finance, I believe that would be better for the PRC as well. Too strong a role for state-owned enterprises can choke growth, and an excessive role for the security apparatus can dissuade investment. I hear frequently from American companies about the challenges they're facing. The Council's 2023 members' survey revealed that companies are reconsidering their investment plans and resource commitments, with a higher proportion of companies indicating plans to move some of their operations out of China than in any year since 2016. These trends should be concerning to China and point to the potential benefits to China of pursuing structural reforms and treating foreign firms fairly. Beyond attracting more foreign investment, this would help address the inefficiencies and vulnerabilities that have resulted from China's economic practices at a critical moment in its economic trajectory. Alongside seeking a healthy economic relationship, we've also pursued cooperation with China on global challenges. The physical and economic impacts of climate change continue to mount. Too many low-income and emerging market economies suffer from unsustainable debt. In response, the Biden administration's investments at home and deepened ties abroad are restoring America's leadership in addressing the urgent and severe global challenges of our time. But as the world's two largest economies, representing 40% of global GDP, the US and China together have an obligation to drive collective action for the benefit of people and economies around the world. Treasury and the People's Bank of China co-chair the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, though there's much more to be done to increase our collaboration on climate. We've worked with China on sovereign debt issues in developing countries, and we see potential for recent progress on specific cases to open the door to better and faster resolution for debt-distressed countries, as progress has been too slow. And we've advanced work with China to strengthen the international financial system. China has now agreed, along with most other countries, to an equally proportional quota increase at the International Monetary Fund that will strengthen the role of the IMF at the center of the global financial safety net. As we've pursued a healthy economic relationship and cooperation on global challenges, We've also maintained our commitment to protect our and our allies' national security using economic tools when needed. This is an area where we cannot and will not compromise, but our administration has also made sure to clearly explain our actions and directly express our concerns. We communicate to avoid misunderstandings that could cause harmful instability. We did this with the rollout of President Biden's executive order on outbound investment last August, where we're taking narrow, targeted action and are being transparent about our rationale and our intent. We've also communicated our concerns with certain PRC actions, including its export controls on critical minerals, as well as the support that certain Chinese companies have provided for Russia's defense industrial sector. When I met with Vice Premier He last month, the progress the US and China had made over the past year was evident. We jointly stated that neither side is seeking to decouple, that we welcome the objective of a healthy economic relationship that provides a level playing field, that we're committed to working together on global challenges, and that we will intensify communication going forward. Through our meetings and our statements, we established important parameters for our economic relationship and its future path. This progress will serve us in the year ahead. So let me provide an overview of three main priorities for the US-China economic relationship in 2024. First, over the next year, the United States will aim to continue to responsibly manage the US-China bilateral economic relationship. We know this relationship will face continued challenges. There are many areas on which the US and China strongly disagree. There is also always the risk of shocks that impact both of our countries. We seek not to resolve all our disagreements nor avoid all shocks, because this is in no way realistic. But we aim to make our communication resilient so that when we disagree, when shocks occur, we prevent misunderstanding from leading to escalation and causing harm. Our work began by establishing durable communication channels that can withstand challenging circumstances. Next year, the working groups will continue to meet regularly, and I plan to take my second trip to China as Treasury Secretary, where a significant portion of the agenda will focus on discussing difficult areas of concern with my counterpart. The United States will maintain our commitment to clear communication on our actions, from our outbound investment regime to the rollout of additional Inflation Reduction Act provisions to our sanctions, and we will keep pressing the PRC on its national security actions. Continuing to stabilize our relationship to prevent escalation, that won't make news. But our economies, our people, and again, also economies and people around the world will be safer and more secure. This is what it means for the US and China to build and responsibly manage our relationship. Second, over the next year, we will continue pressing for clarity on China's economic policies and policymaking to better inform our own decision-making. 50 years ago, when China was less than 3% of the global economy, excess supply or changes in demand in China, in fact, Chinese economic policy more broadly, mattered far less to the rest of the world. Now, at nearly 20% of the global economy, China is too large to export its way to growth, and its economic policy choices have far-reaching consequences. The same is true for financial stability. Financial shocks in China and China's response to them do not occur in isolation. Understanding China's plans, especially how China intends to respond to challenges with local government debt and the real estate market, or how it might react if unexpected weaknesses in the economy should arise, is crucial for those of us charged with policymaking in the United States. As we learn more, we will continue to raise concerns on areas where the U.S. and China disagree, from the possible global spillovers of China's industrial policies to actions China has taken that can disadvantage the private sector. We will also ask for greater transparency on China's non-market practices and foreign exchange practices. We will reinforce, along with our partners and allies, that for a healthy economic relationship to be sustainable, it's essential that there is a level playing field for our firms and workers. More clarity will allow us to make better decisions on behalf of our citizens, and it also helps policymakers in the many other economies that could be affected by the choices China makes. Third, over the next year, we will aim to accelerate our work with China on areas where our countries and many others would benefit from our collaboration and joint leadership. It is often well understood that military leaders need to have quick and reliable means of communication to keep a crisis from spiraling out of control. For economic policymakers responding to financial stress, it's also critical to know the counterpart on the other end of the line and be able to make a quick call. To enable this, the United States and China will facilitate exchanges between our financial regulators, as the United States does regularly with major financial centers such as the European Union and the United Kingdom. We already have efforts underway to exchange information about modeling climate stress scenarios, which is crucial to understanding and preparing ourselves for the threat climate change poses to our financial systems. And we're facilitating a similar technical exchange on how each jurisdiction handles and how we'd best coordinate if there were a failure of a global, systemically important bank or GSIB in the US or China. There's also scope for collaboration on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, including addressing illicit finance risks associated with cryptocurrency. We're particularly focused on illicit finance in fentanyl, which has become the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 49. In November, President Biden and President Xi agreed to resume bilateral cooperation on counter-narcotics with a focus on disrupting the flow of precursor chemicals used to make fentanyl. We're already seeing progress, and the Treasury Department and Chinese economic policymakers have a key role to play in taking aspects of this cooperation forward. We will also continue pushing to jointly address global challenges. This could include pursuing coordination on issues like nature and biodiversity, as well as adaptation and resilience, or developing common principles to achieve net zero, building on Treasury's domestic work on net zero principles for US financial institutions. We will continue to seek faster progress on sovereign debt restructurings in outstanding cases, and advocate for needed changes to the debt architecture. We see opportunities for collaboration at the intersection of debt and climate as well, as it's crucial that debt distress not block low-income countries from investing in their sustainable development and taking climate actions. And we will look for ways to continue partnering with China on strengthening the international financial architecture, including through evolving the multilateral development banks. I'll end by returning to the 50-year mark that today's event commemorates. Over the past 50 years, China has undergone a massive transformation, and the United States has as well. And over the past 3 years, President Biden has invested at home, built strong economic relations in the Indo-Pacific, and from this place of strength, pursued a pragmatic economic approach to China. It's an approach rooted in the understanding shared by those in this room that American workers and firms can benefit from healthy competition on a level playing field, and that collaboration between the U.S. and China is necessary to tackle the immense challenges the world faces. But it's also an approach that recognizes that we're separated by stark differences in perspectives and policies. So we're under no illusion that navigating this relationship will be easy. So today, I don't declare victory or set goals we can't achieve. Instead, I affirm the approach we are taking, proceeding purposefully and carefully to responsibly manage our economic relationship. Some benefits of this approach we'll see quickly. Other benefits we'll see over time. Still others will be clear only if we consider the alternative, a world in which the relationship between the U.S. and China is unpredictable and tumultuous, in which people around the world fear that our disagreements may escalate into conflict that could undermine their lives and livelihoods. Put simply, as we end the year and look to the year ahead, I'm convinced the course we're charting is not just pragmatic, it's what's required of the world's two largest economies if we hope to achieve the best outcomes for our people and people around the world for the 50 years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is now my privilege to propose a toast. As Ambassador Burns said, on November 29, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger passed away at the age of 100, and earlier today he was laid to rest at a private ceremony in Arlington National Cemetery. Everyone in this room owes a debt to Henry Kissinger, one of the key architects of the US-China relationship and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Henry's persistent, long-term, careful diplomacy around the Nixon visit in 1972 set the foundation upon which the bilateral relationship rests today. An immigrant to America, how fitting is it that he rose to be the preeminent foreign policy practitioner and scholar of his era. And yet he was a kind and gentle man. He took great joy in his friends and family. He was a generous mentor to those who had the privilege to know or to work with him. What an exquisite gentleman. While we have lost our finest diplomat and scholar, let us raise a glass and toast his greatest achievement, the contemporary US-China relationship. It would not have happened without Henry Kissinger. He is now gone, and it is up to us to carry on his great legacy. Let us lift our glass in honor of a great American, Henry Kissinger. Cheers. Please enjoy your meal.